Really fascinating explainer based on an article by Lawson Akikbe from the Center for Nigeria Progress. We are looking at a piece titled Air Force One or Air Force Shame, which completely dissects the controversy surrounding a Qatari luxury jet that was gifted to the U.S. presidential fleet. Now, my goal here isn't to take a political side or tell you what to think. Absolutely not. Instead, we're going to clearly map out Akikbe's specific perspective on American standards, ethics, and democratic norms. So, let's get started.
So, Akikbe kicks things off with a pretty profound question right out of the gate. He argues that this Qatari jet gift isn't merely, a fleeting political controversy or just another news headline. He sees it as a deep stain on the very ideals America has spent centuries promoting. The foundational question we're exploring today is really this: can something as seemingly straightforward as accepting a luxury gift actually threaten the structural integrity of a whole republic?
He actually uses this striking phrase to describe it: reverse Robin Hood politics. Think about the mechanics of that for a second. The richest, most powerful country on Earth accepting an incredibly extravagant gift from a smaller, developing nation is, well, in his view, a spectacle of astonishing impropriety. It literally flips the usual global dynamic completely on its head. It focuses entirely on the flow of influence rather than just the flow of wealth.
Section 1. The Incident. The Qatari Jet Controversy.
Okay, so the catalyst for all of this was Donald Trump unveiling a luxury jet gifted by Qatar for use in the Air Force One fleet. But here's the thing. According to Akikbe, the issue isn't really the physical aircraft itself. It's not about the plush leather seats or the upgraded engines. The core of his argument really centers on what this aircraft represents on the global stage, especially coming from a nation that traditionally loves to lecture other governments on transparency.
Section 2. The Founding Fathers' Vision. Republic versus Patronage.
Right, so we kind of have to define patronage here to understand the author's point. It's essentially a culture of gift-giving, where the strict lines between holding public office and receiving private benefits get seriously blurred. Akikbe highlights a major irony here. American diplomats have literally spent decades lecturing developing nations about the dangers of this exact kind of system. So embracing this gift, he argues, triggers corruption alarms in basically every governance handbook Washington has ever exported.
Akikbe draws a really sharp contrast to show how the Founding Fathers viewed this threat. On one hand, you've got the constitutional prohibition against officials accepting gifts from foreign states without congressional approval. Why does that even exist? Well, because of the fear on the other side, a deep historical suspicion that foreign governments could effectively purchase influence through generosity disguised as diplomacy. The founding principle was incredibly simple, really. Public servants owe allegiance strictly to the nation they serve, no exceptions.
Section 3. Symbolism over legal technicalities.
Now, Akikbe definitely anticipates the obvious defense here. The "but it's legal" argument. Even if supporters argue the jet serves a legitimate governmental purpose and checks off all the legal boxes, he asserts that such arguments completely miss the point. The ethical stench, to use his words, remains. Republics don't survive just because every single action is technically legal. They survive because officials exercise restraint and recognize that some actions are just simply beneath the dignity of their office.
Section 4. Paralyzed institutions and eroding norms.
And this brings us to what Akikbe finds most remarkable and, frankly, alarming about this whole affair. It isn't just the gift itself, but the utter helplessness of the institutions meant to stop it. Congress appears completely paralyzed. Ethics watchdogs, marginalized. And perhaps most tellingly, political supporters are cheering behavior they absolutely would have fiercely denounced if a political opponent had done it. He warns this creates a highly dangerous lesson. If you accumulate enough political power, every single norm just becomes negotiable.
Section 5. Historical Precedents of Decline.
Democratic decline rarely starts with, tanks in the streets. It's way more subtle. Akikbe draws a direct, historical parallel to the Boris Johnson years in Britain, where misconduct basically just became political background noise and rules seemed to only apply to ordinary citizens. His explicit warning for the U.S. is pretty stark. America is facing its own version of this exact phenomenon. It risks transforming from constitutional leadership into a style of personalized politics that looks a whole lot more like an oligarchy.
So the real tragedy Akikbe lands on isn't just that the gift was accepted, it's that political associates and supporters apparently see absolutely nothing wrong with it. Think about what this means for us. A healthy republic inherently depends on citizens who are actually capable of being embarrassed by the conduct of their leaders. When a society loses that capacity for embarrassment over ethical breaches, all those institutional safeguards we just talked about, they become incredibly fragile.
Section 6. The author's proposed solutions.
All right, so how do we fix it?
For any future administration handling this issue, Akibe outlines 3 really specific, actionable steps. Number 1, if the aircraft remains in government service, seize it permanently into public ownership. Second, strip it of any personal association, treating it strictly as a historical reminder of when ethical boundaries dangerously blurred. And third, which is absolutely crucial for the long term, enact robust ethics laws. These laws cannot just rely on the goodwill of politicians anymore. They literally need to be robust enough to withstand leaders who possess neither restraint nor shame.
And that leaves us with an incredibly powerful, lingering question. Historically, the United States has survived massive crises because its institutions were ultimately stronger than individual ambitions. But Akigbe argues that for a nation that once championed Republican virtue, accepting a luxury aircraft from a foreign government is a symbol of decline, for sure, not strength. So I leave you to consider what we've unpacked today. In the face of eroding norms and negotiable ethics, are America's institutions actually still strong enough to hold the line? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep asking those tough questions.